Let's go ahead. It seems like the majority of folks are already in the room. So hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this webinar session. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Fernando, and I come with the Region 9 Head Start Association, and I'm happy to be your webinar host today. So feel free to contact me via the chat option of Zoom with any questions regarding logistics that you may have, such as any audio, video, or connection issues, and I'm happy to troubleshoot those with you behind the scenes. Please note that due to the current situation with COVID-19, our webinar platform Zoom is experiencing a lot of traffic. So if during the session you experience any lag or connection issues, we apologize in advance. As a registered attendee, however, you have the ability to log out and back into your session using the same credentials. If you have any questions or experience any issues logging back into the session, feel free to visit our website and send us a note, and we will do our best to help you get back in. Just so you know, this webinar session will be recorded and will be made available for on-demand consumption within 24 hours. You may find the recording up on our YouTube channel, which can be found by visiting our website at www.region9hsa.org. I'll go ahead and share that link again on the chat throughout the session today, so you have that handy. Resources tied to this session, such as the PowerPoint slides, YouTube videos, and the certificate of participation will also be linked to our website as well. So watch for that link that's going to go into the chat in just a minute. We encourage your participation today. Dr. Diana has a few poll questions in the queue, as well as she will be asking a few questions here and there that we want your responses to be submitted via the Q&A, and we'll do our very best to address them live as if the time permits. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our topic for today, engaging young children in STEAM and MakerEd explorations at home. And our speaker today will be Dr. Diana. Thank you, and take it away, Dr. Diana.
Okay, good morning. I hope that everyone's staying healthy. I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar and giving of your time. It shows great dedication to your profession. The majority of the planet is facing a new way of life due to the coronavirus pandemic. With most schools closed, parents are at home with their children and have become the primary educator. For some, it will come with ease. With others, it will be very trying. And my hopes are with this webinar is that you'll find it beneficial as you provide support for the parents remotely. So our agenda for today, we're going to find out the principles and practices of STEAM and Maker education, why we should be incorporating STEAM and Maker education at home, and particular ways and ideas parents can incorporate STEAM and Maker explorations at home. And we'll close the session with questions and answers, permitting we have time. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I started teaching in 1981. My first job was on a very small island, a U.S. territory, Guam. I had very sloppy handwriting and I didn't like grading papers. Well, I did do other different science teaching jobs, but in 1987, I decided to venture out on my own and I established a science education consulting company. So I traveled the nation and the world, providing hands-on, minds-on, inquiry-based professional staff development to preschool through high school teachers in science and STEM. I also conduct interactive keynotes. And most important for all of our participants out there today is I want you to know that I go in to the classroom still several times per month presenting hands-on programs for young children. So I think this is very important for you to know. So, and I am based in sunny Cocoa Beach, Florida. So enough about me. So we have our first poll question for today, and that is, how many of you are currently introducing your young children to STEAM learning experiences within the classroom? So if you just take a moment to respond to that, it'd be great. Do we have anyone responding, Fernando?
Yes, responses are slowly coming in, so I'll give it another few seconds here, and then we'll share the results.
We could
I
probably...
see only one response coming in. If you have the opportunity to please participate in the poll question, we'll greatly appreciate your feedback.
And we can move along as well. Oh, wow. Okay, that's important information for Dr. Diana. Well, hopefully after this webinar today, we're going to see that we have a lot of people that will incorporate STEAM within their classroom.
Perfect. We're ready to move on.
So STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, and art, and math. And some of you may be familiar with science, technology, engineering, and math. And what we're doing today is we're also incorporating the arts. So what we want to do today is we want to look at the principles and practices of STEAM education. A key foundational principle of STEAM education is that learning experiences should integrate all 5 disciplines. What this means is that the child will have the opportunity to see how all 5 disciplines are interconnected. We are not teaching the disciplines in isolation. And as you can see, we have from the left, we have the science, the young child using the technology, the engineering, they're tinkering, they're taking something apart. Then we have a child constructing a human body out of clay. And then we have them measuring an actual structure, the mathematics. So the idea is a quality design STEAM learning experience incorporates all 5 disciplines. STEAM is child-driven versus adult-driven. The adult is acting as a facilitator during STEAM learning experiences. They should not be directing, leading, etc. The adult provides the opportunity for the child to be engaged and empowered through their own interest and actions. The adult can guide the children by encouraging them to ask questions. Key foundational principles of STEAM education is that learning experiences provide opportunities for the child to undertake the engineering design process. And that's what you see up on your screen there. It's very different than the scientific method. The engineering design process is a cycle. The child can revisit any of the components at any time. Children are encouraged to improve and modify their designs. For example, if they are given the challenge of building a boat with recyclable materials, they can change their materials if they find their first choice of materials did not work. The engineering design process also shows the student it is okay to fail. It's more about the journey versus the end product and result. And I cannot stress enough to parents and educators, do not worry about the end product, how pretty it looks, whether it floats or sinks. Look at the journey that the child is going on. Very, very important for today's webinar. STEAM learning experiences help to develop and strengthen 21st skills, also known as the 4 C's. So a well-designed STEAM learning experience, whether it's conducted in the classroom or at home, will develop and strengthen creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. So those are called the 4 C's. Now I have an open-ended question for you to respond to, and we're not going to wait very long, but I just want you to think about this. What do you envision when you think about maker education? So you could go to the Q&A and just jot down a word or two, and we'll wait a few seconds, about 30 seconds or so, maybe less, to see if anyone wants to share. What do they envision when they think of maker education? You getting any response, Fernando? Oh, it looks like a lot.
We did, yeah. So let me go down the list. So they're saying child-driven creative projects, loose parts to create with, creativity, education that prepares children for life, hands-on, robots, process, and a few more, but just given the time, those are some of the responses we received. Thank you for participating.
Dr. Diana loved those responses. Thank you so much. What a great group we have out there. I'm so excited. Wow. So to the left, we have two pictures. To the left is probably what you might envision being in maybe a preschool or primary level classroom for a makerspace. And to the right, we have an example of what parents could do at home to create a makerspace for their children. All we have to do is have some way to store, as someone mentioned, a lot of different things for children to build with, to create with. So a makerspace doesn't have to be some set designated area. It can be a very small area within the child's home, and the parent provides building materials for them. A makerspace is a unique learning environment where children are provided with opportunities to create, tinker, play, engineer, and fabricate with a wide array of materials. Doesn't that sound like fun? Making is driven by the child versus the adult. So we're talking the same principle as STEAM education. It's driven by the child's curiosity. Making is driven by the child's interest, and making is open-ended. The major differences in maker education and STEAM maker education can incorporate the design cycle, which includes thinking about the needs of the recipient of the product being created. So in maker education, we really have a lot of your social, emotional learning skills, which is very important at this time. And at this time, many parents are providing opportunities for their children to make, craft, and create. So all of this makes perfect sense. Maker education helps to develop and strengthen creativity, entrepreneurship skills, and community. So why do we want to incorporate STEAM and maker explorations at home? So there are many reasons to support providing STEAM and maker learning experiences at home. However, two of the major factors are that children are natural-born scientists and makers. And secondly, STEAM is all around us. So not only do STEAM and maker education develop 21st century skills, they also nurture curiosity and develop and strengthen social and emotional learning skills. And what I'd like for you to do is, if you go to the question and answers and just open-endedly for the participants that are out there, why don't you share what are the social and emotional learning skills, those 5 skills that are so important in today's society? What are 5 skills that you think that STEAM and maker education helps to develop and strengthen in children? So we'll give you about 30 seconds to respond to that. What are some of the social and emotional learning skills that STEAM and maker education develop and strengthen? And we'll let Fernando gather up that info.
Okay, so we're seeing some responses coming in. Conversation skills, turn taken, emotional regulation, teamwork, self-esteem, patience, language, sharing, relationship connections, lots of feedback. Thank you so much for participating. Communication skills, science, problem solving with others, and a ton more.
Wow. This is such a great group. So not only do STEAM and maker education develop and strengthen 21st century skills, they nurture curiosity, which is extremely important in the education journey. We often observe that the natural curiosity of young children is often squelched when they enter the kindergarten classroom based on time constraints, classroom structure, benchmarks, and all those other goodies. Secondly, STEAM and maker education help to develop social and emotional learning skills. And as you've all been writing there in the Q&A, that all 5 of the social emotional learning skills are actually developed and strengthened within STEAM and maker learning experiences. So another good reason to support that. So if you have access to your phone, I would suggest you take a picture of this slide. You're actually going to have access to this PowerPoint, but these are the materials that parents would want to have within their classroom and within their home to actually provide STEAM and maker learning experience for their children. And these are the same things that as educators you'd want to have. And if you look there, the materials are readily available, they're low cost, and many of them are recyclable materials, which is great because you can go in your dumpster and get them. In fact, if you want to jot this down, one of my favorite books that I've just been incorporating within my trainings and classes is called The Dumpster Diver. So you might want to jot that book down, The Dumpster Diver. It will be in your manual underneath literature resources, but it's a great book. So as you can see, we're not asking parents to have real expensive materials, just your very basics. Just letting you have time to look over that, that list. So now let's look at ways to incorporate STEAM explorations at home. And one of the things that I want to mention, which is Dr. Diana's pet peeve when I'm conducting professional staff development for teachers, is that I never use the word activity. When we talk about STEAM, we're talking about developing the 21st century skills, and one of those skills is critical thinking. And when we look at an activity, it's very teacher-driven. There's usually an end result. We're kind of pushing students and children down a certain pathway. But when we use the term explorations, investigations, and discovering, that is much more STEAM-based because it is child-driven. So I want you to think about that today. So when you get back into your classrooms, how can you design learning experiences that are exploring, discovery, inquiry-based versus activity-driven? So a key foundational principle of STEAM education is reflective journaling. And I have a poll question for you. I may not have given it to Fernando, but if you do journaling of any sort, if you could respond yes or no or into your chat window. It looks like we do have, how many of you incorporate journaling to some extent with your students? I would love to know that. Do we have anyone incorporating journaling at this point with their young children?
Yes. Let me go ahead and end the poll. Thanks for everybody who participated, and I'll share the results for everybody to see.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much for participating. This is a great group, wonderful group. Thank you so much. So when we talk about journaling, one of the things when I go to schools as a consultant is I see a lot of cut and paste, and it's very teacher driven. with STEAM and maker education, it's so much about the child. It's about engaging and empowering the child. Therefore, what we do is we incorporate what we call reflective journaling. So I want you to think about that word, reflective. What does it mean to you when you reflect upon something? So what you want to do is you want to, if you're not incorporating journaling, when you get back to school, whenever that is, it might be a month from now, it might be longer, try to incorporate journaling and encourage the parents to incorporate journaling at home with their children. We're not concerned about legibility, spelling, etc. It's about providing the child with the tools to reflect on their learning. And if you see the materials on the right, parents can guide their children during the STEAM learning experience by asking questions. So the idea is to always have access to the writing materials. So just look at those materials there to the right. And most parents should be able to get those materials within their home. Sorry for the dead air. The T in STEAM stands for technology. Quite often individuals envision the use of computers and digital technology to be the sole representation of technology. However, any tool that a child puts within their hand to gather information about the world around them is considered technology. So at home and within the classroom, adults can provide simple tools such as magnifying lenses, binoculars, compasses, and household tools. So when I go into classrooms, students as young as 2 years old are already using household tools, compasses, magnifying lenses, simple balances. And I do use a form of a simple digital microscope called the Zoomy microscope. And teachers, you might want to write that down, Zoomy microscopes. You can get it off Amazon for about $35. In fact, every home should have a Zoomy microscope. So now we want to actually look at ways parents can incorporate STEAM learning experiences at home. The key point to keep in mind that during all the ideas we are introduced to today is to provide opportunities for the child to experience the engineering design process. So I want you to think back. Remember that engineering design process being a cycle where the children are engineering and they use their imagination, they create and they modify. So for example, with whatever building blocks the parents have on hand, give the child a challenge. For example, build a bridge with the blocks, build the tallest tower, build a structure that you see in a book. And this is really a fun challenge. So you can get children's books or even books that are an adult would be reading to a child and have the children replicate a structure they see in a child's fairy tale or whatnot. And if you look on the slide, you'll see the center photo shows a boy using a tool called a level. And you can buy levels at Dollar Tree, but my favorite levels come from a hardware store called Harbor Freight. And that level that he's using is very safe, and he's a 4-year-old, and that level costs about $1.79. Again, many parents are probably going to have building kits at home, and they can ask their children to undertake engineering design challenges with their building kits. Do any of those building kits look familiar to you? The one to the left is from Lakeshore, which I'm sure is one of your favorite educational companies to purchase from. The bottom right, we have a building kit from Discovery Kids, and up the top, we have your very infamous Duplos. Another STEAM learning experience is for children to explore shapes. Shapes are very important. So the best way to introduce shapes to children is to have children walk around the house since they're home and observe all the different shapes. Go outside and observe shapes in the backyard and in the neighborhood. Shapes are very important in engineering. The shape that is chosen for a structure will determine the structural integrity of the structure. In other words, will the structure be structurally sound? Parents can have their children create and build 2- and 3-dimensional shapes using readily available materials. So we have students building in our middle slide here with craft sticks and binder clips, and they're also journaling, and you can get those materials from Dollar Tree. We have parents going on a walk around the neighborhood to explore shapes in the neighborhood. And the slide to the right with the young girl holding the cube there, we have taken toothpicks and we soaked garbanzo beans overnight, and we made 3-dimensional shapes. We then dipped these structures into a soap solution so we could see the faces here. Many teachers incorporate this within their classrooms, but they use candy such as gummy bears and gumdrops and marshmallows. And Dr. Diana is not a proponent of using things like that for building. It's much more meaningful to use building materials that are going to be long lasting. And also the children aren't going to be eating the garbanzo beans, and cockroaches don't like them either. So in any case, at home and in the classroom, adults can take children on STEAM-based nature walks. They can provide the children with tools to use in nature and making their observation as well as journaling materials. So I kind of got ahead of myself there. Sorry about that. But going on STEAM nature walks is very important. We want to make sure that the children have access to tools. The tools that they could bring outside might be a magnifying lens, a simple microscope, some rulers, a tape measure. And when they go outside, we can be making observations of the items to your right. So we can be observing patterns, shapes, living things, textures, nature of matter, and weather. And I don't know if you have the ability, Fernando, to ask the teachers how many of them do take their students on STEAM nature walks.
So we don't have a poll question in the system for that. However, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A to respond. And we're seeing a lot of yeses in there. So the majority, I would say there are yes for that question.
So the idea is if you're taking your students on these nature walks, which you're more than likely doing, is what Dr. Diana would like to see you do is try to incorporate science, technology, engineering, and art and math within those nature walks. So before you might have been just going out, let's collect some leaves, let's do rubbings, and that is great in of itself. But now let's add some tools to our nature walks. Let's have the students go on a Fibonacci walk. As you can see the slide to the left, 98% of everything on our planet has what we call the Fibonacci sequence. Pineapples, broccoli, seeds, flowers. So what a great concept to introduce to students. And this would be a great thing for parents to be doing at home as well, just going in their backyard. So material science, oh my goodness. What do you think, teachers? Do you think parents are gonna like doing these type things with their kids? Fernando, send them to the Q&A. What do you think, teachers? Looks like pretty messy to me.
It looks like it's almost like an even split of yes and no's.
Okay, so in STEAM, we refer to the nature of matter as the solids, liquids, and gases as material science. And if you could jot that down, teachers. So when we're incorporating STEAM lessons within our classroom, we're wanting students to become familiar with materials, material science. And by the way, that's one of the biggest areas to go into for engineering for a career. We want to provide opportunities for children to use their senses and explore as many different types of materials as possible. This may be messy, and we know that some children have tactile issues. How many of you teachers know some of your students that do not want to touch anything, water, dirt, and they run when they see oobleck? And parents may not be so keen on their children creating a mess either. And I think that's probably the major issue. But this is a very powerful learning experience for children. I know that all of you are wonderful teachers that are attending this webinar, and you do provide these opportunities for your children within your classroom. But to be messy is to learn. So when we talk about learning about material science, we want the children to have access to simple mathematical and scientific tools to explore the nature of matter. And real important on the bottom left, we want children to be able to compare and contrast building materials, because we're always giving them something to construct, some type of engineering design challenge. So we want them to have the opportunity to explore foil and plastic and cardboard and rubber and water and ice. We want the children to be able to, see what these materials are like and to use their senses. Now, I want you to look at this slide right here in the center with the bricks. So the red bricks are available off Amazon and the internet, but they're $50 for 50 bricks. And you can imagine how expensive that would be to build a 3-bedroom home with those bricks. But what Dr. Diana did is I got a material called Quickcrete, and then I got rubber silicone ice cube trays, and I poured the Quickcrete into the trays, and within overnight, I was able to make my own bricks. So within the classes I provide to students, the students use wet sand as their mortar, and they build the structures, and the children love doing this. So this is something that parents can be doing at home, because Home Depot and Lowe's are still open. So to the right, we see a lot of different materials that you can provide for children to explore within your classroom, and parents can have at home on hand for children to explore. The idea is that children should be touching and using all of their senses as they explore the nature of matter. So a real big part of STEAM is exploring floating and sinking, especially when we're talking about boats. We don't want to get in a boat with something that's not going to be floating. So the first thing we want our children to do is to compare and contrast weight. So parents are probably not going to have access to pan scales at home, but they might be able to make something. They can engineer a scale at home with their children using a lever and then just an object underneath. We then go on to giving children the opportunity to actually just explore what floats and what sinks. Then we go on to having them create boats out of aluminum foil and place pennies in them to see, how many pennies the boat can hold before it sinks. And then I usually end this lesson by having children create boats out of recycled materials. So I'm sure all of you are doing floating and sinking STEAM experiences now. The idea is to add those tools and incorporate the engineering design process. So structural engineering is very, very critical in STEAM learning experiences. Parents can provide children with a wide array of materials to build dimensional structures such as houses, bridges, towers, etc. They can ask the child to build a house that can withstand wind, water, etc. Parents can read The 3 Little Pigs, which has been updated with the STEAM theme, 3 Pigs, an Architectural Tale. And this book is probably available on YouTube right now as a read aloud. So if you could for a moment, just go on the Q&A and put yes or no. Have you read The 3 Little Pigs, an Architectural Tale to your children yet? And if you haven't, I hope you do when we get back in session. There's a picture of it in the top left-hand corner. So the idea with structural engineering challenges is we want to provide children with just very simple materials that we see on the right to construct structures of their choice, but we can also be giving them a specific engineering design challenge to undertake, such as building a bridge, building a tower, and whatnot. Did you get any responses from that, Fernando, for 3 Little Pigs?
Yes, I did see some yeses. However, the majority are saying no.
Okay, so you definitely want to get that book, Three Little Pigs. It will be listed in your manual underneath literature connections. And it's called Three Little Pigs, an Architectural Tale. And I do know that some school districts are a little leery about incorporating fairy tales that might scare the children. But these are actually really written so that that big bad bear doesn't look so bad anymore. So how many of you have ever seen the documentary video Kane's Arcade? If you could go to the Q&A and just put yes or no, that would be great. Kane's Arcade. What do you have, Fernando?
We're seeing the majority are saying no, they have not.
Oh, wow. I am so happy to be here today. So do me a favor, teachers. You have a lot of time on your hands. I want you, when this session is over, go on YouTube and I want you to plug in Kane's Arcade. It's a 15-minute video. It is so inspirational, and I show it to children as young as 2 years old. I show it during all of my professional staff development training. Kane is a Latino boy who goes to work every day with his father, who's a mechanic. And what Kane did is he built an elaborate arcade system using the boxes that the parts come in. And what happened is a documentary filmmaker happened to come along this Kane's Arcade. He made a short documentary. And, you know, Kane's now a teenager. There's a Kane's Foundation now. And there's also a global cardboard challenge. But the idea is what we want to do is with cardboard challenges, we're providing the children with very simple materials. We're providing them with cardboards, levels, rulers, also some of the books there you see in the top left. And the key thing is you need to have masking tape. And one of my favorite tools, which is in this picture to the left, is the canary knife with the yellow handle and the black part of the knife. That is available from Amazon. It comes from Japan and it sells for $7, and there is no substitution for that knife. There's no other knife like that on the market. But what's nice is children can actually use this knife without cutting themselves. Wow. So a favorite of young children are ramp and marble challenges. Ramp and marble runs are a favorite of young children. They are natural builders. Children can be given racetracks, cardboard, paper tubes, pool noodles, insulation tubes, tape, and balls to create ramps and marble runs. The big thing is if you have children under 3, the parents are going to want to use balls that the children aren't going to swallow. So you want to look at bouncy balls, tennis balls, and things of that sort. Let's go in the Q&A for a moment. How many of you do ramp and marble run challenges with your children?
We're seeing a lot of yeses.
Great. So children are natural born builders. They are going to love building ramps. And the idea, again, with why we're attending this session today is to make sure that we're actually incorporating STEAM best practices. So child-driven, incorporating the engineering design process, and also incorporating tools and journaling. So this is my favorite of all STEAM learning experiences to introduce teachers and children to of all ages. And that is mechanical engineers, tinkering and deconstructing. So what I want teachers to do right now is how many of you have introduced your children to tinkering and deconstructing? How many of you have introduced them to tinkering and deconstructing? So you can go to the Q&A. And then also, I want to know how the children responded to it. And we're going to wait about 20 seconds, and we're going to talk about how we actually go about doing this in our classroom and at home. So I'll let Fernando look at the responses.
So far, we're seeing a lot of no's come in, Dr. Diana.
Wow, okay. So most of my clients, meaning schools, do incorporate tinkering and deconstructing with their children, even as young as 2 years old, but they're just using bigger objects and take apart toy kits, and they're also supervising them as they do that. Many of my schools have what we call a Take Apart Tuesday or Thursday. Could you imagine how exciting that would be for all the different classes to be taking apart a gadget on the same day? That would be so exciting. So basically what you want to do with the young children, you start with the take apart toy first. Then we allow them to work with the nuts and bolts and things of that sort. And then we go into actually taking apart broken household gadgets and toys. Obviously, when you're working with the really young children, this is a heavily supervised exploration investigation. We're not saying we're giving young kids a screwdriver and a wrench and a hammer and leaving them on their own. Key thing, if you look at the materials, the top right, make sure you have goggles available. So the idea here, teachers, is from now on, don't throw away your broken gadgets that you have. What you want to actually do is keep those on hand for the children to actually take apart. Another important part of tinkering and deconstructing is to take the deconstructing parts, the deconstructed parts, and attach to them to some form of poster board or cardboard, and then the teacher and or parent can talk about all these parts. What are the colors? What are the shapes? How do these parts work together to allow that gadget to work? And again, you want to make sure that the children have on their safety goggles. And by the way, all these pictures are from Dr. Diana's classes that I conduct for children and trainings I conduct, as well as pictures that my clients actually send in to me. So this can be done in the classroom, teachers, and at home. So how many of you now think that you've been inspired to incorporate mechanical engineering at home? Go to the Q&A and I want to see yes or no. How many of you think you might attempt it when school starts back up?
Seeing a lot of yeses come in.
What a great group. I love it. I love it. You are the best teachers out there. So robotics at home. Robotics is a growing field in STEM. Thus, it's ideal to provide children with opportunities to explore robotics at home through toys and kits and building model robots from recycled materials. You see these robots over here? So these are robots that children have made during my lessons. And this is all materials that we would have thrown away or gone in the landfill aside from the tape we use. So how many of you out there have incorporated having your children build a recycled robot within your classroom? Can we have you go to the Q&A and yes or no on that?
The majority are yeses.
Oh, wonderful. This is such a great group, Fernando. I am so happy to have you all here today. The children are so lucky to have you there. So we're getting towards the end of our webinar, and this is kind of a controversial issue, coding and the excessive use of technology in our world today. Most of the research out there has found that it is very negative for the young child to have extended periods of time on any form of screen whatsoever. So have you introduced your children in your classroom to some form of coding, whether it's screen-free or coding? Can we just have yes or no? Have you introduced them to coding at any level at this point? Yes or no in the Q&A part?
The majority of answers are no's.
Okay, so this is pretty much a must at this point when school resumes. And for, let's just say for next school year, I'm hoping that you will consider and asking your directors or directors that may be on board here today to consider purchasing any of these screen-free gadgets. Coding is considered an essential skill for students to learn in the 21st century. However, it's important to limit the amount of time young children spend on screen time. We all know that right now, probably a lot of children are watching TV and on their parents' gadgets. These gadgets here introduce children to coding principles, but they are all screen-free. So to the top left, we have the Codapillar by Fisher-Price. You can run this over and it still will work. We have the Code and Go mouse for about $29 from Learning Resources. Botley robot from Lakeshore for about $40. This is a really cool robot, the Fisher-Price Kinder robot, really new on the market for about $50. The Bee-Bot about $40, the Coding Ladybug for $30. These are all gadgets that parents, I would actually suggest parents buy for their kids and have them within their homes themselves. So how many of you think you might consider introducing children to coding for next year, screen-free? Q&A.
A lot of yeses coming in.
Wonderful. This is such a great group. I love you all. So probably most of you are familiar with the theory of loose parts, and incorporating the theory of loose parts within the home is an ideal opportunity for children to be engaged with making. And as you can see, parents will provide children with a wide array of materials from nature, craft items, and building items to use their imagination, create art structures of their choice. So when we talk about loose parts, it's not just within the classroom. Loose parts can also be done outside of the classroom and within the family's backyard. So loose parts, big thumbs up for connecting loose parts to STEAM and, of course, maker education. So our last slide here, and it looks like we'll have some time for Q&A. You guys have been a great audience. Thank you so much for being here today. Dr. Diana is a big proponent of incorporating STEAM and maker children's literature. On this slide here, you can probably see 50 books. They're all actually could be applicable for young children, except for a few of them. You can see there's some chapter books up to the left there. You will get a manual, a link to a manual that has 2 pages of probably about 300 STEAM and maker-based literature resources for you. Many of these books, what's so exciting is they're actually on YouTube as read alouds. Now, when you look at that slide, do any of those books look familiar? Have you seen any of those books? Let's do a Q&A, Fernando, underneath the poll there. Do you recognize many of those books?
The majority are yeses.
Great, fantastic. So we're going to close. Before we close, I do want to show you my connections. So if you have questions after this webinar, at the top we have my website. I have a Facebook business site, a LinkedIn, a Twitter, and last I have my email there. I would love to get questions from you after this webinar. I would love to meet you in person, whether it's through a professional staff development, but I thank you all for being here today. I haven't had any behavior problems from any of you. You're a great group. And we are going to close our session with a Q&A, and I think we have about 10 minutes left. So very good. So I'm going to let Fernando take over from this point.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Dr. Diana, and everybody who submitted their questions. So let me start going down the list. We do have about 17 questions that were asked throughout this session. So one of the questions asks, I want to know how I can teach my toddler STEAM.
Okay, so basically and I actually do training for infants and toddlers. Okay, and this is a very detailed question. So basically everything that you saw today, and that was a great question, by the way. So the person who asked that, and there's probably a lot of you that have the same question out of 1,000 people that were here today, give yourselves a pat on the back. The key difference is that everything we covered today could be done with an infant or toddler, minus working with sharp tools. The idea is that everything you do with an infant and toddler you are going to be just making sure that everything is much larger. So nothing's going to be able to be swallowed. And you're also going to be doing what I call interactive demonstrations, where you're not just going to be the main demonstrator. You're going to be, you know, letting them touch and explore, but you are definitely going to be doing a lot more supervising. But, you know, you're probably already incorporating STEAM within your lessons and you just don't even realize it. So great question.
Perfect. So I see this question coming in a lot. They're asking if you can go a little bit more detail about coding. Some folks might not understand what that means.
Okay, so let's go back to coding here. So great question. So what coding is it introduces young children. Can they still see that? Can they see that screen now, Fernando?
Yes, the screen is
Okay,
still up.
so coding, great question. Big hand for all those people that asked that. Coding is a universal language. In fact, in schools now, coding is considered a foreign language elective. In fact, they pretty much are promoting individuals to take coding as opposed to foreign languages. But at the young level, whether you're starting to introduce coding to a 2-year-old, which is probably about the youngest you would introduce, we start with introducing them to patterns. So with all these gadgets you see on this page, the child is actually having to press buttons that are left and right, turn and whatnot. So they push the buttons and then they press the go, and that particular gadget is going to actually perform all the codes that that child has entered. So we're introducing them to the very basics of coding. So think about following directions, patterns, mathematics, directions, and our 21st century skills. So hopefully that helped answer that question. But it's definitely something you should consider. And if you're able to do donorschoose.org, all of these are very affordable for donors to get into your school. And I'm hoping that you've got all, since you have some time, you know, why don't you head on Amazon, which I'm sure you're all doing, and maybe try just purchasing one of these, maybe the Fisher-Price Caterpillar to start with, and try that at home, and you're going to love it.
Great. So next question is asking, are there resources available in Spanish to share with families?
Yes, actually, in the manual you're going to receive, there are quite a few STEAM-based books that actually are bilingual, and most of them are in Spanish. So the children's literature, yes. Is my manual in Spanish? No. So that'd be a matter of you having to translate it, or Fernando, I don't know if your organization could even consider doing that at some point. You know, that might be something very beneficial. But also in your manual, great question, by the way, and so just jot this down for the person that asked that, because I know a lot of you probably have that question. In the STEM manual that you will get a link to, it's a 20-some page manual specifically for this webinar. There's going to be STEAM resources listed for you, and several of those will give you STEAM explorations that are actually written in Spanish. And they're all going to be websites that are free for teachers and parents to visit.
Perfect. So next question, can you incorporate journaling in an infant classroom?
Okay, great question. Big hand to that person. Absolutely. So I did a keynote several years ago during the deepest part of winter, and you know, I'm from Florida, so I was freezing, but during that day, the individual was at a university. They brought me to their child care center and the infant and toddler section, and all around the room were butcher block paper and posters, and it was all the children's scribbling. The children would ask questions to the teachers, and the teachers write the questions, and the children respond orally, and the teachers write down their responses, which probably most of you are doing something along that form right now. But the idea is we're not talking about, you know, they're just learning how to hold things. So probably even if you were to give them a leaf, allow them to put some paint on that leaf and make a print of it, or just even look at the leaf and give them a crayon and see what they do with that crayon while they're making observations of the leaf. That's what we're talking about at the infant level.
Excellent. So we have time for a few more questions. How do we get programs who are full academic on board with STEAM loose parts?
Okay, whoever asked that question, I want you to word that a little more detailed, or Fernando, repeat that. The person who asked that question, I don't know if I know a few people have gone off the session already.
Yeah, so the question came in as, how do we get programs who are full academic on board with STEAM loose parts?
Oh, well, hopefully you gained, make sure whoever asked that question, is that person still on board, or did they sign out already? Yes or no? Are they still here?
I'm not seeing any movement on the chat.
Okay. Okay. So that was a great question. So STEAM, loose parts is very, it very much develops and strengthens the 21st century skills as well as SEL skills. So that should be the answer right there. And many of you are based in California. California has adopted what's called the Next Generation Science Standards, which is all about making the connections to all of these disciplines. And most important is what we have is called the engineering design process. So all science lessons now have to incorporate an engineering design component. So there's the argument for your directors. And I'm hoping we have some administrators that are on this webinar as well.
Excellent. So one more question, and then we'll begin to wrap up our session here. Any resources for inclusion children to teach them STEAM?
Okay, so, you know, I would need to know specifics, obviously, because when we're talking about learning disabilities, whether they have an audio or visual or movement, so that's kind of a very open-ended question. But the teacher would definitely need to just provide modifications for the lessons. But again, in the manual, you'll see where the STEAM resources, for whoever asked that question, there are websites that have information about designing lessons to be, you know, equal learning experiences for all children and learning capabilities.
Diana, the person who originally asked the question added children with low vision.
Okay, so low vision. So what you want to do with, great, thanks for being here. I know some of you are dropping off. You're going to get your you're not going out to get your Starbucks, but you're having to get your green tea or something this time in the morning. But any case, low vision. So what you want to do with that is you want to be using bigger objects and be using a lot of tactile things. But I would just make sure that the objects are bigger. And then also most of your learning distributors, the companies like Lakeshore, they actually sell tools that are designed for children that have visual issues, visual disabilities.
Great. Well, we do have a few more questions. However, we are running out of time. So we appreciate everybody who submitted their comments and questions. If you have any follow-ups, feel free to go to our website to the link that I've been sending on the chat. And there you will find Dr. Diana's contact information, and you can send her a note to follow up. I just want to thank Dr. Diana for her time and excellent information today. I want to thank everybody for your patience on getting into the session and getting your questions answered. Just want to remind everybody again that this session was recorded. And if you have a coworker or a peer that was not able to join in the session, once that recording goes up onto our YouTube channel, feel free to share that with them so they can watch it. And our YouTube channel can be found on our website. So if you go to our region number 9 HSA.org website, and I'll go ahead and post it on the chat one more time, you are going to get the link to that YouTube channel where all these recordings will be made available as fast as we can. As well as, I know you will ask the question, how do I get a certificate? That's also linked into our website. So if you go to the link that I will go ahead and share one more time on the chat, you will find the resources that Dr. Diana kindly gave us. to put up there for folks that participate into this session can get. Once again, thank you, Dr. Diana, for your time. Everybody, be safe out there. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you on the next one.